Sorry, I was talking in circles around this. I think one more concept I'll just present to you, which again, it's a preference. It does not mean it's better. I keep having to say that because I don't like people like going to war of like League versus Dota. They're both incredible games. I like League. I also like Dota. I think League is well designed. I also think Dota is well designed. Different games, different preferences, right? One of the things you want to ask when you're designing a game is where do you put the skill expression? And so based on your game and your players and your needs, infinite skill expression does not necessarily have value. There's a lot of people who come into the chat and be like, August, why would you remove skill expression from the game? Like, isn't all skill expression good? Because game is a skill-based game, and therefore the more skill expression, the better. And you got to ask yourself, what types of skill expression do people want to engage in, right? Because some skill expression, even if it indicates you are a better player, is not necessarily like an enjoyable way to express skill for the given players. And so we found, as an example, that we believe that players in League tend to, not always, but tend to like it when the skill expression is more defined by the champions they are playing, as opposed to like, I have to buy this item and my skill expression is about me using the item. Versus how my champion uses the item, right? Or how my champion plays the game. And so that's kind of a thought about it. And again, that doesn't mean that that type of skill expression is bad for Dota, but we found that like, you know, it's like choose the skill expression that you think your players will enjoy the most, and there's only a certain amount you can have. Before the game gets too complicated and too weird and too crazy, which can get extra rough when you consider that you're balancing the game around pro play as well. And, you know, pros are really, really good at like just going crazy on the optimizations, right? A really hyperbolic way to talk about this is imagine that the way you win a jungle game is by doing calculus, right? Like imagine that if you queue up for jungle, we don't let you fight your camps until you've solved a calculus BC exam. That quite literally is skill expression, right? That is a type of skill, is being good at calculus. And it makes League harder, and it makes League more skill expressive. Because if you want to jungle, you gotta be good at calculus. That's the rule. Unfortunately, junglers can't do math. Anyways, though, but like, it's a type of expression that if you asked most League players if they'd want to engage in it, they'd be like, nah, I don't want to play that. That's not for me. That's not what I'm interested in here. And again, the example is hyperbolic, but the thing I'm getting at is you want to, when you're designing a game, pick and choose what type of skill expression you think your players will enjoy the most and focus the expression there. So as an example of another difference between League and Dota is we remove deny, right? That does not mean deny is bad. It does not mean Dota is bad for having it. But I would guess that there's a number of players who prefer not having to think about killing their own minions and would prefer not having to think about their opponent killing the minions that they were trying to kill, right? Like, deny is a very, very different dynamic in terms of what laning means, right? And, you know, it's got some really cool outputs in Dota, but it's different and it feels different, and, you know, that's good or bad depending on, like, what you're looking for characters. And so with, like, League, we were like, well, the skill expression of laning is not going to be in denying minions. It's going to be more focused into, can you last hit your opponent's minions, and can you last hit your opponent and kill them, things like that. More focused on those types of things. Yeah. Another great example of this was TFT. So when we were designing TFT, set 1, it was based partially off of Dota Auto Chess. If you guys don't remember Dota Auto Chess was probably like the original auto battler. It was a Dota custom game mode, and you go in, you'd get an army of guys, they'd auto battle. It was fun. Really, really fun game. One of the things you could do in Dota Auto Chess was something called juggling. And what juggling is, so for those of you who don't understand TFT has a bench. A bench is, you can have 9 units on it, I believe, 9 or 10 units. And the thing about the bench is, if you want to upgrade your units, you need multiple copies of them. So what you'll do is you'll buy units, you'll put them on the bench, and you'll save them for later, either to put them in at some time or upgrade them, things like that. The catch, though, is the bench has limited space, so you can't save everything. You can't just buy every unit you see in the shop and be like, and I'm just going to see what I get, right? You have to actually make choices because you have limited bench space. Y'all following me so far? Dota Auto Chess had something called juggling. And what juggling was Dota Auto Chess let you buy as many units as you wanted and sell as many units as you wanted, as long as you cleaned up your board by the time the round started. And if you didn't clean up your board by the time the round started, it would auto-sell random units and you'd probably just lose the game. But as long as you cleaned up your board by the time the round started, you could just buy like 20, 30, 40 units, put them on the board, find the upgrades you needed, sell everything else, and you'd be good to go. It was a very high-level APM check. That was what juggling was. It was a very high-level APM check. The best players in the game needed to be really good at juggling because it gave them a huge advantage in flexibility in being able to buy like all the units they needed. And so when we were working on TFT, one of the feedback we got from people who'd played auto chess is, where's juggling? Like, because we wouldn't let you do that. We would not let you juggle. And the reasoning behind where juggling was, like they'd ask, is like, it's skill expression. This separates the good players from the great players, because a really, really good player is going to have killer APM when it comes to juggling, and that's going to separate them from someone who can't do that. And it was true. That's real. It was real, legitimate skill expression. But the reason we didn't add juggling is we were like, we don't believe that in most games of TFT, the skill test should be mechanics. It shouldn't be APM. Now, can the skill test in some games of TFT be APM? Yes. TFT has made augments that test your APM. TFT has made certain characters that test your APM. Like, it's okay in some games of TFT to have a mechanical challenge. But overall, we were like, back then, we're like, hey, TFT is a game about certain things like decision making and pressing your luck and gambling and stuff like that. And we don't think that having super, super, super high APM is a skill we should be testing in most games. And that was like one of the reasons we moved away from juggling. It was just like, it wasn't that testing a skill was bad. It was, this type of skill is not something we want to test. And so going back to my ridiculous league example about calculus, the reason we don't make you do calculus to jungle is because it's not the type of skill we want to test. We don't think league should be about testing your skill at calculus. There are other skills we'd like you to test. And so then tying it all back in, not every skill test is a good skill test. When you're designing a game, you need to choose the types of skills that you want to test your players on that would make the game the most competitive and the most enjoyable. But certain types of skills, even if they would technically make the game more competitive, would not necessarily be in a good way.